Hello and welcome to Locals Supporting Locals, the heartbeat of the Okanagan radio show. I am your host, Kevin Proto, and my co-host is Dee Nicholson. How are you, Dee?
I'm living, as you know.
Excellent. Thank you. And with our show, we like to bring up issues that affect us not only at a local level, but also globally, and we try to tie everything in together. And tonight's show is very special because we're talking about something that that's been affecting a lot of different cities, countries worldwide in regards to the to fracking and pipelines here. And I'm very fortunate to have with us tonight Damien Gillis, who is one of the co-founders of Common Sense Canadian. Damien is he's Vancouver-based documentary filmmaker with a focus on environmental and social justice issues, especially relating to water, energy, saving Canadians' wild salmon. He's also the co-founder of the online publication, the Common Sense Canadian, and he's currently just finishing up a CBC documentary, Fractured Land, and that's going to the CBC documentary channel and Knowledge Network. And so we're going to be talking in regards to fracking and pipelines. So I welcome to the show Damien Gillis. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Well, Damien, I have to say it's great to have you here because, you know, we all know what the concerns are with, especially with fracking. We're hearing fracking concerns from all over the world, from Europe, from the States, and from Canada. And, of course, we're talking about the XL pipeline here and all kinds of dangers that are being put on us by the oil companies whose greed seems to know no bounds. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Damien.
Oh, it's my pleasure to join you.
So, Kevin, take it away, dude.
So just so people know as well, for any of those people who have the local supporting local calendar, Damien was actually kind enough to write in the calendar with the Common Sense Canadian in regards to fracking and the pipelines. And so it is truly a pleasure to have him on the show. So if you can explain to people or break it down for them, like what is LNG and fracking?
Well, liquefied natural gas is a way of turning gas into liquid by freezing it to minus 160 degrees that compresses it about 800 to 1. So you can then put it onto a tanker and take it to new destinations outside of our North American market. And the feedstock for this industry that's being proposed for BC, a massive new industry with anywhere from 5 to a dozen plants that are in total that are being proposed by some of the world's biggest energy players, the big Chinese, Malaysian and Japanese and Korean energy players, as well as North American and European. And what has happened, that would be fed largely by fracking or shale gas, which comes out of northeast British Columbia and Alberta as well. But the main focus here would be on BC. And partly the necessity for LNG is because of this relatively new collection of technologies that we call fracking, which involves drilling deep underground, sometimes several kilometers, and then also extending that drilling horizontally through shale beds that contain gases, using a cocktail of enormous volumes of water that are pulled out of the rivers and lakes and streams of the north and injected with some pretty toxic chemicals and in a very fine sand that is blasted into these bores and cracks open the shale formations and then start pulling the gas out. And because of this technology, which is being deemed a game changer in the energy industry, and it's actually for the first time America, and it's used for oil as well, shale oil, has become the largest oil producer in the world, surpassing Saudi Arabia for the first time in a long time. And so it has opened up huge supplies of energy that weren't formerly accessible. But what it's also done is the market is now awash in cheap gas, and so it's driven the price down. Meanwhile, in places like Japan, where the Fukushima disaster forced them to shut down most of their nuclear reactors, that's created a temporary high point in the price of gas in those markets. So Asian markets are paying up to 4 times as much for gas today as we are in British Columbia. So the big idea for these companies that have really kind of killed their own market by overproducing is to turn this product into liquid, put it onto tankers, and now ship it to places like Japan and Korea and make much more money there. There are a whole slew of problems with this big grand vision, which is really the only thing going from this Liberal government right now. It's the sum total of their economic vision for the future of British Columbia, and they're putting all their eggs in this one basket. And there are a whole list of problems, both economically in terms of the financial fundamentals of what they're describing and the huge benefit they're promising to BC taxpayers and jobs and these sorts of things, but also enormous environmental consequences that would accompany this industry, something along the lines of 5 times as much fracking as we already currently have in northern British Columbia, 50,000 new wells, which is close to double the amount that we've drilled in the entire 60-year history of the gas industry in BC, and something like a tripling or quadrupling of the entire carbon footprint of British Columbia, not to mention huge issues around water. So that's kind of the environmental trade-offs that would be required to make this industry float. And on the flip side of that, if we look at the economic issues, there are a lot of holes in the story that's being told to us. And even the geology, we're being told from expert independent geologists that there's a lot of, the story that's being told here is more hot air than natural gas.
Wow. So in essence, really what they're doing is something along the lines of what the hydro companies are doing. They're billing us for all this hydro we're supposedly using. But from what I've heard from a guy who runs a rather phenomenal energy savings company out here, he's telling me, and he is certainly well qualified to say so, he's telling me that only about 26% of what we actually get billed for is actually good, clean hydro. And the rest is junk, either dirty electricity or it's billing and procedures and things that have nothing to do with the production. So what you're talking about there essentially strikes me in the same way that there are a lot of built-in costs that the consumer is now having to pay. And of course, every time they want to ship something from here to there, including a carrot, we're paying more because of it.
Well,
and now what you're telling us is that it's entirely inefficient.
It's very inefficient. It's the least, I think it would not be a stretch to call this the least efficient form of energy, commercially available energy ever developed. So we're here on the one hand that this is the cleanest fossil fuel on the planet. That's a direct quote. That's the brand that comes from our premier and this province in terms of liquefied natural gas is the story they're telling. The climate science on this from the people that have been doing the research into the true carbon footprint of shale gas, not to mention LNG, because you're taking shale gas and then you're adding to that by having to burn enormous amounts of energy to compress this gas. It's very power intensive, this cooling process, and burn more gas to power the tanker taking it to Asia. So the process, I explain it like this. Essentially what we're doing is we're taking enormous volumes of water and energy in Northeast BC, and we're using that to get energy out of the ground. And then we're burning more energy to process that and take out certain impurities, et cetera, to compress it. And then we're putting it in a pipeline, and we're burning more energy to keep that gas compressed along the way. And it's getting to Kitimat or Prince Rupert, where we have these proposed LNG terminals, and we're burning more energy to turn it into a liquid. And then we're putting it on a tanker, which is going to burn more energy to get it halfway across the world to these places in Asia, where we're also sending our raw logs and other raw materials without adding value to them in our local economy. And we're burning more bunker diesel to get that to the same place, and we're taking that natural gas, and we're burning more energy to decompress it and get it to a power plant where it's then going to power the manufacturing of those raw logs into tables or some other cheap good powered by their cheap labor, put it back on another tanker, burning more fuels to get it all the way back here, where we then put it on a diesel-powered truck, drive to the local Walmart, where we get into our gas-powered vehicle and drive that there, because we're not investing in public transit in this province, and all so that we can save $5 on a table at Walmart that's going to end up in the landfill in a couple of years. That, to me,
you know what? That's
insanity.
making an anthill look very efficient.
It sure
as
is.
Opposed to what we're doing.
This
is sheer stupidity. What you're describing.
I think that's not a stretch to look at it that way. You know, it's squandering some of the most important assets that we have. One of them is water. Another one is good food-producing land that's being destroyed in northeast BC, some of the best farmland that we have, both for the fracking process, but also all this energy that's required to make LNG is one of the justifications for flooding another 30,000 acres of prime farmland in the Peace Valley that we're being told to create a new dam, Site C dam. That power, we're told, is we don't need it for our own homes and businesses here. We're plenty self-sufficient in our system. That's also being justified to power the LNG industry. So we're trading food, we're trading water, we're trading clean air and all these things for a very inefficient form of fossil fuels that's somehow being branded in an Orwellian way as the cleanest fossil fuel on the planet. And,
but wait, Damien, I got to say something here. What I'm seeing here is this is a supply chain, right? And that supply chain, every time you turn around, somebody's making a buck off our sacrifice. Every time you turn around.
Yeah, there's another point to that, which goes back to something you were saying earlier. And there are tremendous taxpayer subsidies that are hidden in amongst this system. Everything from the roads that have to be built to access all this energy development, to the royalty structure around our natural gas, which is the lowest in the world. And we only took in $144 million of royalties from the oil and gas industry in the most recent year on record that we have the data for. And that's that's a pittance. It's not a fraction of our provincial budget, and we're being told somehow that through this LNG industry that we're going to rake in $100 billion of taxpayer money that's going to pay off our provincial debt. Meanwhile, when you look at the export tax structure for LNG that's just come out recently in the last budget, we probably can't expect to see a dime from that for the first 20 years this industry is operating, because it's a two-phase process, and under the phase one, it's a very low, it's a 1.5%. That's about the first 5 years, and then they get all that money back as soon as they enter into phase two. And under phase two, it goes up to 7%, but they don't pay a dime until they've recovered they get to deduct all the capital costs of building these pipelines and plants, which for some of them will be $20 to $30 billion. So, if they don't have to pay any export taxes until they've recovered or deducted $30 billion, then we're being played for fools here. And we're seeing this around the world in other jurisdictions like Australia, where they've developed this industry. And the industry is plagued with cost overruns in building these projects, and they go back cap in hand to the taxpayer, and they ask to have their royalties credited back to them or cut down. And ultimately, there's all these hidden subsidies, like a $10 billion taxpayer-funded dam to power the industry, that if you really look at it, the taxpayer in British Columbia, the public, is being used here to subsidize the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah, like every other industry, we're being used to subsidize. I'm tempted to say what else is new, but this is such a biggie. It's so huge.
The scale is bigger than anything we've certainly ever seen in British Columbia. We're talking numbers like hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions, in terms of resource health.
As we were saying earlier, it's not just a BC concern, although BC is a major focus because of, all of the damages that you've been referring to. They're happening to some of the most beautiful, pristine, and productive landscape in the world, and they seem to have no care whatsoever what they damage. At the same time, you've got the Hupkassis First Nation suing because they've never ceded their land, and they want to put these pipelines right through their land. And then on top of that, you've got the same kind of thing going on out in New Brunswick. And all of this stuff is going to benefit people other than Canadians. And when you look at the fact that Harper has basically destroyed or eliminated or prevented or torn down every refinery in the country, we now can't refine our oil properly, and we cannot even make our own steel anymore. So really what's going on here is that there's an international network. If you step up high enough, this is what you see, is it not? An international network of profiting, taking the profit out of whatever resources, wherever they can find them, and filtering them out of the country into the hands of the corporate elite.
Yeah, I certainly, we see a trend of that with the selling off of strategic Canadian energy assets to Malaysian government-owned company, Petronas, and Chinese government-owned CNOOC, which are two major companies that have purchased big oil and gas, Canadian oil and gas companies recently. We can continue to expect the profits to flow outside of the country. We've changed our labor laws so that we now can enable foreign temporary workers to be paid a lower wage than Canadians for the same job.
And so they gave Jim Flaherty such a big state funeral for all that, too.
Well, that actually falls under Jason Kenney's portfolio of immigration, and he hasn't done a very good job of defending it. It's been quite controversial even amongst conservatives because these are sort of fundamental kind of conservative Canadian values that you create jobs for Canadians. The idea of giving away our oil and gas to foreign governments, it doesn't sit well with most Canadians, I think, when they look at it. So things like this FIPA agreement, which the Hupkassis that you referenced there are fighting, the Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Act. These deals would really put the interests of other countries ahead of Canada when it comes to managing our resources, our economy, and even protecting our environment. They would be able to sue us to prevent us from imposing our own laws, for instance, on how water is treated in the fracking process.
Yeah, so and I have to remind our listeners at this point, this is what we have been talking about for the last few weeks now. We've been talking about how all of these international deals have profit protection built into the deal. And one major example of that is the Samsung plants that were supposed to be built here for that natural gas production in Ontario. And the Ontario government went and canceled the contract, but now the taxpayers are on the hook for 20 years of the profits that Samsung would have made if the plants had been built. So we're paying them what they would get even though they never invested a penny. And it works out to over $1 billion that taxpayers are on the hook for right now. So far from being able to pay off BC's debt, far from being able to pay off anybody's debt, in fact, what all this stuff has the potential to do is put us all further and further in debt. The ones who wind up not in debt are the corporations who are profiting, and the government sits there and says, oh, well, the taxpayers will pay for it.
Well, we see this with so many other issues too. When we get into the debate over smart meter issues, who's profiting, the same thing with genetically modified organisms, we see the same thing, and it's all a spin and propaganda. And it's always the same people at the top making all this money without any concern towards our environment, our planet, and we the people here. Damien, I wanted to just to let the folks know here, like how close you are to this subject when it comes to the fracking and the saving of farmlands here, because where Site C Dam is, I mean, you and your family were living there, or were part of that, right?
Well, actually, it's a little west of there, under the Williston Reservoir is where my family land is, and it was flooded before I was born in 1968 for the construction of the W.A.C. Bennett Dam and Williston Reservoir, which is the first big, arguably the first big, one of the first big industrial projects, and certainly the first big cornerstone of our public energy system, BC Hydro. And that unleashed an era of industrialization in that region that continues today and would be vastly augmented by this LNG vision. So my family went from having a beautiful piece of farmland that was able to grow. It was incredibly agriculturally productive. We heard at the review panel hearings into the proposed Site C Dam from some of the top agrologists in the country that have really reviewed that area. And this is some of the best farmland in the country. And it has even longer growing seasons than, it's kind of ironic because it's quite far north, but it actually has longer growing seasons than pretty much anywhere else in BC except for the Fraser Valley. And the productivity is very much on par with the Fraser Valley. So it's terrific farmland, and that was we already lost a lot of that, including my family, when the first big dam was built there. So Site C would be the third dam in that same valley, and would also flood and impact and segment some of the best farmland that we have left. And it's enough to feed up to 1 million people, from what these agrologists told the panel there.
And isn't that crazy how all we keep hearing is how the world is hungry. We're running out of food. We need food. And meanwhile, we're going down this path of taking away that food. I mean, like, does any of this make sense?
It's really interesting here. One of the other justifications, because it's very clear, and even BC Hydro can acknowledge, it's very clear that we don't need... We're energy self-sufficient. We're electrically self-sufficient in this province today. We took on a lot of these private power projects, which you and I have talked about before, Kevin, which added more supply than we needed in the first place. And we were doing very well with conservation here in BC right now, these power smart programs. And also costs are skyrocketing as a result of things like smart meters and a number of inefficiencies at hydro, and these private power contracts have really driven bills up, and we've got another 28% hike on the horizon. That's not even counting paying for this $10 billion dam. And so that has an effect on consumption, because ultimately, in some cases, for people of a lower income bracket, that can be quite painful.
Or a local business too.
Sure. It forces people to really choose between heating their homes or certain activities and paying their mortgage, etc. So power bills are rising, conservation is improving. So we don't need any new energy in this province for those purposes, for our own uses, for decades to come. And so meanwhile, we're told that the two justifications we've heard for this dam are powering the LNG industry. The other one is exporting excess power to California. Now, ironically, in doing so, we would sacrifice enough land to feed a quarter of our population. Meanwhile, we produce just over 40% of the food we consume in BC, which is a terrible record of food self-sufficiency. We grow less than half of the food we need, and we rely very heavily on places like California to import much of our food. But they, meanwhile, are in the midst of a major drought, and we're seeing that affecting food prices, and ultimately will very likely affect our access to those imports. So we're trading food-growing land for energy to export to a place that is then, exporting food back to British Columbia. Wouldn't we be better off just growing our own food and powering our own communities with the energy that we have?
And I love the name of your website and what you do, Common Sense Canadian. Does that make common sense to anybody listening to the show right now?
No, there's very little sense in these public policies that we're talking about. That's for sure, and we're putting the emphasis and priority on the wrong things, and particularly when you monkey around with things like food and water. In the future that we face, that's dangerous business.
Well, I tell you, I just got an email in here a little while ago, around 6:30 tonight, and this is regarding the Enbridge pipeline, and it is coming from the Statimic Nation, First Nation, and they are holding the Sundance up there against the Enbridge pipeline, and they have this massive sign up, and it says, Harper does not have the authority. Enbridge pipeline is not happening. And these are the natives who are putting one great big roadblock right smack in the middle of all these plans that you're talking about. And so I find it rather intriguing and ironic that when the British took over North America, they got a lot of help from the natives. And if they had not had the help from the natives, this place would be entirely speaking French. And on top of that, when we had the Meech Lake issues, again, the natives stepped in and made the breakup of Canada impossible. They've saved this nation twice already. Do we need them a third time, or are we willing to stand up with them? That becomes the question.
Well, certainly with the recent Chilcotin case victory at the Supreme Court of Canada, piled on top of dozens, if not hundreds, of other legal precedents at the various levels of our courts in Canada, have really entrenched, particularly in British Columbia, with these unceded territories, which largely weren't treated. And even for the ones that were treated, these court precedents add even more force to the power that they have to stand up to these sorts of projects. And we're hearing it from the Treaty 8 First Nations in Northeast BC. They're delivering a very clear message to the Premier that without their support, there will be no LNG industry, because they won't abide the kind of fracking that's going to be required to power the industry. And this province and the federal government ignore First Nations at their own peril. We've seen many projects that have gone by the wayside, and I think Enbridge will be another one of them as a result of that kind of mistake. And I think it's really starting to sink in, not just to the sort of environmental leaders and people who pay attention to these things, but I think even to the general public is starting to, through all the media coverage on these issues, is starting to come around to the idea of the kind of rights that First Nations hold. And there's certainly some very powerful alliances that have been formed. In the Peace Valley region, they call themselves Cowboys and Indians, the Cowboy and Indian Alliance, and they've really, the farmers, the landowners, like the pioneer families, like my family, that the ones that are still on their land and farming it and are standing in the path of this proposed dam, have really linked arms with the First Nations, who depend on that territory for their traditions and hunting practice and these sorts of things. And they're really working very closely together, and it's a very powerful alliance that's being formed right across this country right now.
Well, the one thing, I mean, what they use is economy here, money. You know, we had Dr. Shiv Chopra that formerly worked for Health Canada, and as he put it, in order for them, to move forward with these trade agreements like Dee was pointing out here, to get you down their path. If they have to, they will squash you of all your resources for revenue to the point where you're desperate, to the point that you will actually sign their treaty or agreement. So they put you in desperation, and hence why we all got to reconnect, at that local level here to take this back. And, forget those dreams of, I want to be a millionaire, and just live off of what you need, at the end of the day. In order to stop what's going on, we got to stop the greed system is what we need to stop. Your thoughts, Dee?
Well, you see, my problem with that, I understand exactly what you're saying, and that is exactly what we do need to stop. But the thing is that I think is making a lot of people very apathetic about things, and by choice. They're choosing not to say anything, and they're choosing not to fight back, is essentially we're all caught in this web whereby our technologies now depend on this and that, and we are stuck to the point where if we try to back out of this or that, we wind up suffering. And this is how these trade agreements are set up. Once they're signed, like once these liquid natural gas deals are signed, these pipeline deals are signed, there is nothing we can do to fight them, no matter what we do. They've got everything covered up in international law. Everything is tied up in international law where we have no say whatsoever. And our government has its hands tied by secrecy, confidentiality requirements, by TRIPS rules, which is patent protection and profit protection and all of that. So these guys literally are given a free hand to do with us and our resources what they want. And Canadians have no say. Well, it just so happens that because the natives don't have to have any truck with that because some of these lands are unceded. Well, that is a roadblock that they're going to have one heck of a time overcoming. And that should be an interesting battle coming up over the next few years, because a lot of things I think are going to be exposed in terms of what the government has promised these people behind our backs in secret, and why exactly is it that these guys are not listening to the common sense argument coming out of people like you and your website, The Common Sense Canadian, and other experts from the field around the world. They're all saying basically the same thing. This is hugely inefficient. This is hugely damaging. The profits aren't going to stay with you. What in the flying blue blazes do we think we are doing? What the frack is wrong with us?
That's the title of the show. What the frack is going on, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting. The indigenous rights are really manifesting at the international level, too, and I think are very much in conflict with some of these trade agreements that have been signed over the years. And we can expect to see that battle continue playing out. There's a sort of clash between the increasing recognition of indigenous rights. For instance, the United Nations, I don't want to get Kevin going on that, but there's also
no, you don't. That's another whole show.
But you have international bodies, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which is an increasingly big player in issues like this. We see indigenous peoples in Central America that have successfully lobbied at this court and being able to supersede international agreements, international corporations that had taken over land for resource development in their territories. And I think can expect to see a more and more global awareness of these issues. This is a big topic right now. What's going on in British Columbia with these court cases and resource battles has global significance and dovetails into similar discussions that are happening in other countries in South America, Central America, Africa, etc. And I think we're going to see a time here in the future where a lot of these this sort of global trade system comes runs into the kind of wall that you're describing here, Dee, not just what we're seeing here in British Columbia, but on a much larger scale.
Oh, yes, it is huge. I mean, you've got Indigenous peoples all over the world who are standing up, and as it turns out, they have very, very strong voices, and they have very, very strong legal positions, and they may be, in fact, with their legal positions on unceded land, etc., they may very well be our saviors to a large extent. And as they fight, what I'm seeing, I know you're closer to this issue than I am because I'm more all over the map with issues. I'm not focused on any one particular one. But what I'm basically seeing here is that the more they fight, the more we join them.
Mm. And that's what they've been doing that since the beginning, and it's time that we all learn to work together here. You know, they have us so divided, and that's how they win, is they divide and conquer. You know, and so we got kids coming out of school or young adults coming out of universities here with their degrees in, you know, genetic modification or the technology with fracturing, like you see the commercials on TV here, and they come out with this whole mindset of, you know, God move over, we have the savior for all of this. And then they come across people like myself, yourself, Dee, Damien, and they're like, okay, what's going on here? And when we had Dr. Thierry Rain, who was a genetic scientist, like he pointed out, they were actually taught this before they came out, that they're going to deal with people like you, me, and Dee, you know? And so they're trained how to respond to that right off the bat. You know, and this is how they got us divided here. You know, so again, I'm going to go back to what your website is called, or your page. Common sense has to come back into play here. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, just come back to your common sense. You know,
I think you hit on a really good or important question or point, Kevin, which is the issue of our sort of ostensible economic dependence, or peoples have come to or been conditioned to depend on the sort of the jobs that are being offered and touted, and the lifestyles that are based on the availability of cheap energy and consumerism, and we probably are all going to have to be prepared to make some adjustments. But I think ultimately your focus of bringing things back to the local level and focusing on community and family and building resilient systems together is the best chance that we have. And we can do that working with First Nations. We've seen that in communities there where they, through the years of residential schools and being put onto reserves, where they were really taken away from their traditional connection with the land and their ability to feed themselves and things. And that's starting, those traditions are actually starting to take root again. They're getting rebuilt. And I think when you see some of the things that are happening with, even in Vancouver where I live, building bike paths and community gardens and farmers markets on the weekends, it's becoming part of the social fabric again, where we're getting back to growing food, building local energy systems, more energy efficient businesses and homes, getting off of our dependence of fossil fuels. We need to do a better job of planning our communities and building public transit, so these sorts of things, and instead of continuing down that path of being dependent on these resources and international trade systems. But I think that the solutions are there, and if people continue to work together and forge new connections amongst our communities, between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people included, we can have a brighter future.
Well, and that's a very important message that we put out with locals, supporting locals, is we're not trying to recreate anything. We're just trying to get you to understand the way it used to be before all this technology came in, and hence the Citizens for Safe Technology. They're all about, moving forward and evolving, or I shouldn't say, because part of this technology is not really evolving here, but and so it's just about reminding us the way it used to be, and that's what we need to go back to. And it's all going to be taken back at local levels here, because even when you talk about that, like when we're talking about food sovereignty and food safety here, even just here in our Okanagan, which you're familiar with, Damien, just from from Enderby to Osoyoos, there's so many different growing conditions. Even here, you need different boards to figure out, because certain things grow here, certain things grow in Osoyoos, certain things grow in Summerland, and so on and so on. So to put this at one level of, let's say, the UN, for example, to dictate to you what you can and can't grow, it's impossible, because even here we need a board just to figure out what we got to grow here in the Okanagan, never mind anywhere else.
Okay, let me jump in here, because
go ahead. Go ahead,
Dee. I gotta. Okay, this ties in with UN Agenda 21, which basically calls for harmonization of everything. That means that no matter where you live, all the rules are the same. All the availabilities of health care are the same. All the availabilities of food are the same. And the funny part of it is, when you think about it, you go back in our history and you see how our nations were built. Our nations were built by villages.
Yes.
And those villages all, when they were threatened by anything, they circled the wagons, they sustained each other and themselves. They worked together for the benefit of their community and made their community strong. And the communities that didn't do that never got strong. And they faded away. And now what locals supporting locals do is the exact opposite of what Agenda 21 preaches. It is the exact opposite. It is talking about doing your local stuff locally so that you are assured that everything that you do is appropriate to the land you occupy, to the area you occupy, unique to what God gave us, not to what the international corporations want to make out of it. And this is in direct conflict. Bear in mind that the local supporting locals concept is in direct conflict with all this so-called, and I hate the word sustainable, and I hate the word green, because neither one means what it says anymore. They've changed the meanings. They're saying that it's sustainable because everybody's doing it. I'm saying because everybody's doing it, it makes it unsustainable, because just like Kevin just pointed out, you can grow apples in one part of the Okanagan. You can grow peaches in another. You can grow grain crops in one part, but only fruit crops in another. And it's like that all over the world. How can you get single unified standards for everybody? You can't. And then when you start talking about these uniform standards, they are the very standards that produce situations which you have been describing so beautifully, and thank you for that, so simply and easily understandable. This is what happens. The corporations come in under all this so-called sustainable stuff. They make it totally unsustainable for the people at the ground level, but totally sustainable for themselves.
Yeah, Damien, sorry, Dia. Like you got a project that you got coming there, Damien, there, and where you need some funding there to help bring out more towards the information on LNG. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, we're just running a crowdfunder at commonsensecanadian.ca, which is to recruit some public support to invest more resources into covering this LNG issue. Through a series of videos and public events. We've been doing a lot of speaking and public presentations around the province, and would like to continue doing that to share this important information with the public, and deeper investigation into all the elements of this industry, from the shale gas to the proposed LNG plant. So I encourage your listeners to just go to the website and check it out in the first place, as we've got a wealth of information there already on all sorts of things, from food security to water issues and all sorts of energy issues, economics, etc.
And I want to point out, as you say that, I want to point out we do have a global audience here, and people everywhere you live, there are issues like this. And when you are talking about production of videos that are exemplars for other people, then what they can do is if they can contribute to your crowdfunding, they will find resources coming out of that they can use locally in their own areas to fight their own battles with these companies that are so rapacious and looking to take over everything that they own. So everything that you're doing with this project, Damien, applies to everybody, and everybody ought to be helping you.
Well, thank you. I couldn't say it any better myself, and I completely agree that these, what we're dealing with in Canada has international resonance, and absolutely these tools and this information is designed for everybody to use, and we have a growing readership across Canada, so it's not just a British Columbia focused thing. We do dovetail these stories into. We talk a lot about the economics and the environmental issues around what's going on with shale gas and LNG all around the world, and that's part of what we're doing there. So if you go to commonsenscanadian.ca, you'll see a button you could click on to learn more about how you can contribute to that LNG fundraiser, and that would be much appreciated.
Yeah,
well, how much funds are we looking for here, Damien?
Well, we're aiming to raise $10,000 for this series on LNG, and we're about a quarter of the way there at this point. So whatever you can offer is much appreciated.
Yeah, well,
I would definitely like to orchestrate a speaking engagement here in probably in about 3 spots here, our South, Central, and North Okanagan. If I can help you out with that, and I love to support that.
Well, that would be great. I always enjoy. I haven't been a while since I've been to a Soyuz, other than to sit on the lake on a hot summer day, sometimes too hot. But
move over, boy.
5 degrees cooler here in Penticton. So
yeah, no, I loved coming to Penticton, and Rafe Mayer, my colleague, former environment minister and broadcaster, and I have been there and talking about some of these issues around our rivers and the Enbridge pipeline, et cetera, number of times over the last couple of years to Kelowna and Penticton, and beautiful part of the world. So it'd be great to come back there again.
Yeah, so just to throw a message out to the people that are listening, like, it doesn't matter where you live. You know, like we're talking issues here right now that are happening in a lot of other countries. If it's not happening in yours, lucky for you. But if it is, you know, the key message here is you got to start organizing in your local communities here. Get meetings going, start them off in coffee shop, restaurants, wherever they may be, and start putting together the people that you need to take back your local government in order to abstain from a lot of these trade agreements, because that's where the power is at the local governments. They don't want you to know that, but that's where it's at. You know, so yeah, take back your local governments. Come on, Dee. I know you got something to say.
Well, Ontarians have the opportunity to do that in October coming. And where every municipality in Ontario is facing a re-election or an election of city councillors and municipal councillors and regional councillors, and all of these guys have certain powers that have, you know, been given to them over, you know, many, many years. These are precedents. They've been set in stone, carved in stone. And what is happening is at the international level, these councils are being approached by committees that come out of the UN, so they're working us from the bottom up. Now, our best chance as citizens is to make sure that people who are either incumbents or candidates who support the measures that Damien has been talking about today in terms of, you know, letting foreign corporations come in and literally take everything away from us. We have the power in our hands to change that. We have the power in our hands as consumers of every dollar that we spend. We have that ability. And since they're all about profit, what are they going to do if we take it away?
No kidding, eh?
What? Go crying to mommy?
Yeah. Well, you mean you? I mean you are. Sorry.
WTO or the.
You know what? I just want to thank you so much, Damien, because I've appreciated your work for a long time, and you know, people don't realize you're one of those guys that actually go right out into the field, into the tar sands. You know, your family's part of this mantling of these farmlands, and so you're not a guy that actually just watch a couple of YouTube videos. You're a guy that's right in the heart of it. And so I truly, truly thank you for participating in our show, participating in the calendar, and I publicly would love to say I would love for you to participate in our third and upcoming calendar for the South Okanagan. Plus, we also just initiated our first Central Okanagan. And the goal of Locals Supporting Locals is to form the Okanagan chapter, which will involve the North. And I would love to publicly put you in our calendars, you know, to help, you know, educate and fund the work that you guys do with Common Sense Canadian.
Yes, and we'd also love to be promoting the work that you're doing here on this station, because a lot more people are affected worldwide, and through a venue like the Liberty Beacon and Awake Radio, we have the opportunity to share the educational factors that you bring to the table. We have the ability to share the information you're putting together in this video series project that you've got. And hey guys, 10 grand, it's not that hard to pull together.
No.
Not on a crowdfunding. Let's dig for the pennies. Come on, everybody, ante up a buck, and they'll have these videos ready for our use worldwide very soon.
Well, thank you very much to both of you for your kind words of support.
Well, we have to thank you. Otherwise, we wouldn't have anything to support.
Okay.
Well, again, at the end of the day, Locals Supporting Locals is not about me. It's not about you. It's not about Dee. It's about us, you know, and we forgot how to work as a we, you know, and so we just got to work together to help promote what each other does. Everybody plays a role in the solutions to the problem. The corporation took that away from us. And poverty is what gives the government power. So now they're governing way too much over us. So we just got to take that power back, and we can do it. It wasn't that long ago. It's within my lifetime, for God's sakes, where we had all that power. So we can take it back, and it's a lot of it's dictated through the dollars that you spend, and you know, and we got to take back our local governments. Provincial and federal are too far gone for now, and until we can take back our local governments, you know, I got to admit, I have very little faith in our provincial and federal, but that's just
who does. But,
yeah.
You know, and I want to read a line. Remember, I mentioned an email that I had gotten in about 6:30, and there's a line in here that's a message of all the elders from ages past and First Nations. It says, "Protect Mother Earth to sustain your life, the life of all your relations, and for future generations. If we do not do that in any real way, our children are going to be the ones who suffer the most, and our grandchildren may not even have an earth that's livable anymore." So we have choices to make. They're not hard choices. They're easy choices. People think they're hard choices. They are not. You just want to do what's right for the right reason. And if you do that, we will all be okay. But we all have to do that together.
And that's something that the Indians have been saying for generations is, you know, they always look, you know, 7, 10, 20, 30 years, 100 years before they do whatever they do, you know, and why we haven't picked up on that is beyond me, but
it's not
Damien,
profitable, darling.
I know. We're put too much on this paper system, you know, where it's money. It was just a form of exchange is what it was, you know, but people decided to, you know, put it under their pillowcases and start saving up all this paper, You know, and so, you know, yeah, and again, that's where we got to come back to, is start forming our local currencies. You know?
Yeah, and trading, really, truly trading.
Well, and that's something that we're working on, too, is creating the barter network where you put your business in there, and whatever barter you decide you want to do is none of our business. It's what you do.
Well, there's not an awful lot the government can say about that either, which I like.
Well, the thing is, because they want to tax you on every level. So if you barter, they still want to tax you. You know, so you know what? We're going to create the barter network within locals supporting locals. Put your business in there, whatever it is that you do, and whatever you guys work out in the wash is your business. It has nothing to do with me. So at the end of the day, too, if you have a complaint, don't call me. But, you know, we got to learn. We just got to learn to work together again. We're
now,
so
Kevin, what's it worth? I got your phone number. What's it worth?
You know, but I mean, again, working together right now. We got a man on the line here, that Damien here, that's done incredible work. I got a friend of mine named Dee that has done incredible work for 35 years. I'm not even sure how long, Dee, you've been at this, for God's sake.
Shut up, Kevin.
Okay. Oh, she's 18. Sorry, she's 18. I'm sorry. I apologize.
I'm 21.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're of age. Okay. But yeah, you know, so this is called working together, you know, and we're all promoting each other in what we do, and everybody has a role. Anybody listening to this show, if you got a strong back, there's ditches that need to be dug. I mean, I can't begin to tell you what the roles are, but we got some exciting shows coming up for you. Because, let me ask you, Damien, what's your timeline here? Are you able to go a few minutes longer?
Sure. I got a few minutes. Yeah.
That's about what I've got too, and you know why.
Yes, that's right. Dee is very fortunate to have her family visiting her here, and just so the folks know, Dee is in Toronto. I'm in British Columbia here in Penticton, or in the South Okanagan here. So,
and I'm hearing the same stuff from my daughter, who's here visiting from Panama. Oh, my Lord. It doesn't stop. It's all over. It's everywhere.
I know. And I do the same thing, like the Okanagan, and I'm sure you know, Damien, as well, down in Vancouver. We got tons of tourists that come here. And so I ask them the same questions that we face here, whether it be smart meters, GMOs, fracking, pipelines, made in China products, and they're all going through the same crap, you know. So we just need to start talking within our communities, and then we share what we do, you know. And at the end of the day, there's room for all of us, you know. The number one thing when we host our meetings and we have local meetings is check your ego at the door. Number one, you know. And again, it's not supporting local is not about you, and it's not about me. It's about we, you know. And so, you know, everybody can do this. Everybody can do it. You can form a chapter where you are. Produce a calendar, you know. And let me tell you.
And next week, don't forget, next week. Oh, boy, do we have a treat for you. We have coming onto the show next week a guy who heads a Canadian charity called the Canadian Emergency Preparedness Association, and he's setting up community response teams to emergencies. And considering the fact that we're about to be inundated with dangerous pipelines and floods, and we have geoengineering and crazy weather and everything else, we all need to know how to protect ourselves from everything. And that includes fracking mishaps and pipeline mishaps and power mishaps and floods and all kinds of natural disasters and unnatural disasters. We all need that end of it as well, because no matter what we do to stop it, you know, you never know what's going to happen, and that's the time when a community needs to come together. We need to come together now because we're all fighting the same foes. We need to come together with our neighbors and our friends and
John
our community.
Papadakis, right?
Yep, John Papadakis is going to be with us next week, And that's going to be real interesting, and watch how that dovetails in with what we've been talking about tonight. It's going to be a piece of work, let me tell you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we're trying to cover the gamut for everybody, and we're hoping that everyone is paying attention, because we're trying to give power to people through information. And Damien, we have to thank you for this information, because it's very difficult for the average person to understand exactly what's going on. And I have to say, you've given probably the most lucid explanation of the process that I've heard.
Oh,
so thank you so much for that.
I try to do, okay?
No, it's not kind, it's just the truth.
Yeah.
You know, there it is. There it is. We need to understand these things. We need to do things like pop over, I don't care where you live, if you're on the internet, which you must be or you wouldn't be hearing us right now, pop over to commonsensecanadian.ca, and you'll see what Damien's been talking about in spades. And please, 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 if you can afford to pop even a buck in the kitty for the crowdfunding for this project, you're doing your bit to actually save the planet for real. For real. So, everybody, ante up. Come on, you can do it.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how many people give, you know, and you see it all the time with cancer, MS, diabetes, you know, like this, and it's all part of management now. That's another show altogether as well. You know, but
let's not go there now. Don't get me started.
I know, Dee. But, you know, so this is one of those good, heartfelt things that you can get involved in. And so when you see that documentary that Damien and Common Sense Canadian and Rafe Mayer and all the guys that are involved in this project, you know, when that film gets released and all the other things that they do, you can proudly say that I helped to fund that, even if it was just $1. You know,
exactly.
So yeah, you know, and
just remember, for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the battle was lost. There went the war. Right?
Okay, Damien, so if you could give us some closing words, like what would you like to end with here? I know it's not quite the normal radio show you're used to here.
Well, I think we've hit on a couple of important things here. And, on the local theme, this is a local election year, municipal. I know in Vancouver, some of the strongest work that's being done is by our municipal leaders, our mayor, Gregor Robertson here in Vancouver and council, and Mayor of Burnaby essentially told the Kinder Morgan pipeline company that he would not be giving them permits to access to drill through Burnaby Mountain to change their pipeline route. And there's a battle brewing here between local governments and these larger federal and provincial levels of government. And so I think you hit on a really important point. This is a year to really find out where your local leaders stand before you vote for them, and to really empower them by supporting them in standing up for your local community, because we're absolutely not getting that kind of leadership from senior levels of government right now.
Absolutely, or even the lower ones, and this is another aspect that we'll be covering next week, which is going to be very helpful. You're exactly right.
It would be going by some of your communities there in the Okanagan, not too far away, the Kinder Morgan pipeline. These issues like LNG, we have one in the Lower Mainland here that's proposed for Howe Sound, and many on the North Coast. But as we've discussed, I mean, I really think that these are some of the biggest challenges that we face as a province, and they affect everybody. So even if you're in Penticton or Soyuz, I really encourage you to look at the scale and scope of what we're talking about here. And we're in the very early days, and there absolutely is a lot that citizens can do to make their voice known. These investors from around the world have yet to commit really any of the major funding, the tens of billions of dollars that are required to build these projects, and they're hemming and hawing right now. But they hear
good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, you hear more.
It's not only good to know, but think about it. tens of millions of dollars versus 10,000 to produce something to stop it.
Yeah.
So okay. So Damien, if you could send us something on that, letting us know what's missing and everything else like that, so we can point out who, what they're looking for, what they need, and who they're looking at, and so.
Yep.
If we could throw a wrench into that would be super. We love to do that. We
all love wrenches in wheels. Yes, we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there were a lot of good folks along this whole program, like from the extraction of the gas all the way along the pipelines that are proposed all the way to the coast and the tanker routes. There were different First Nations groups and local community organizations, non-Indigenous people, that are really doing great grassroots work on the ground, and they can all use support, whether that be just sharing their petitions or information within your own community, or maybe supporting them financially. I think we're at a really critical moment where we could, if we're strategic about it, we can leverage a small amount of, small numbers of people and funding into some pretty big victories that would help to shape the kind of future that we want to see in this province.
Unreal. We're so glad to have had you on the show today, Damien.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you.
We really are.
So where are you off to next there, Damien?
Well, I'm actually I'm going to be heading off on a camping trip with my fiance to enjoy some of this supernatural British Columbia.
Good for you.
Attaboy. While you still
there
can.
You go.
While you still can.
Yeah. And that's what I often say, like when people, like, they'll send me out and about, whether it be trying to get sponsors for the calendar, selling the calendars, promoting them, or they'll see me leading down a march against Monsanto, taking on the city for smart meters, but then you'll see me on the patio here in our beautiful Okanagan here, and I tell them, like, this is what I fight for, because I enjoy my festivals, my events, everything that goes on in our beautiful BC, Canada, and I'm sure everybody that's listening can say the same thing about their cities and their countries, and that's what you fight for. Get off of your ass and participate. You have to be part of the solution in order to solve the problem.
Yeah, if you're not an activist these days, you're a victim. So let's not be victims.
Yeah. Thank you so much to both you guys. Thank you, Damien. And again, if you can plug your website and your fundraiser at the end here, like right now, that would be great.
Okay, well, thanks again for having me. And again, it's commonsenseccanadian.ca, and it's this LNG crowdfunder that we're running right now, and we could sure use some of your listeners' support. So thanks a lot.
Excellent. We're on it.
Yes, we're all over it. Trust me on that one.
We're on it. Okay.
And Dee, you got any closing words there?
Well,
I know that's a loaded question.
I'm getting invaded by a 5-year-old who is now using a lightsaber on his mother.
Hey, just so folks know, Dee's got her family visiting her, and it's been a number of years, so she's very excited here. So, yeah. Okay, so thank you very much to all our listeners here, and we look forward to next week's show, and it's going to be a doozy and a half again. If you can tell them a little bit more about the show again, Dee, that would be great.
Well, John Papadakis is the head of the Canadian Emergency Preparedness Association, which is a registered charity here in Canada. He is a radiological defense officer and fully qualified to do all of what FEMA does, and he is attempting to form community emergency response teams across the country and to promote them around the world. And this is another way that locals support locals. So we are really going to be pushing this, and, this is the protection end of locals supporting locals. This is the actual physical protection end of how we save ourselves in emergencies. And I think everybody needs a little bit of taste of that. You're going to have a good taste of it next week. John is also a candidate for city councilor. And he's got a lot to say on that area, too, because the power of the people comes forth more at the civic level than it does at the federal.
Absolutely. Okay,
so this is where we get to do it all.
Okay, and just to let people know, Awake Radio is now going to be turning into Awake TV. But in order for them to get onto Awake TV, they need 1,000 subscribers. So if you can go to Awake Radio TV and subscribe, if we can get 1,000 listeners or viewers of our show, we can actually help put Awake Radio into TV, where you can where you can actually physically see everybody that's participating with.
Yeah, and we could show Damien's video.
Can I cut in? May I cut in? Yes, that's on YouTube. If you go to Awake Radio TV, which is a brand new site, just up today, we need 1,000 subscriptions, and that's all we need to start airing live. So you get to see your favorite host, and it doesn't cost you any money. All you got to do is hit subscribe, and that'll really help us out. Each little one counts. Thank you guys for letting me bust in there.
Oh, no problem, Paula dear. Paula is one of our key people here, and she is an amazing help. And thank you, Paula, for all that you do.
Thank you, guys.
Like the one thing that people don't understand, like with we're coming through Awake Radio right now. Like, they don't take funding, they don't want sponsors. They do what they do from the heart because it's the right thing to do. It doesn't matter on religion or background. It's just, do you have a heart and do you care?
It's just pure good karma is what it is. And on that note,
yeah. Okay, so
I have to go deal with a lightsaber wielding 5-year-old.
All right, thank you again, Damien. Thank you, my lovely host, Dee Nicholson, my powerhouse behind me.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yes, thank you,
We'll
Paula.
talk
Thank
to
you
next week.
Yes, and thank you, Awake Radio. Thank you, Liberty Beacon. Everybody subscribe to libertybeacon.com. You can find them on Facebook. Same thing with Awake Radio. Damien Gillis, commonsensecanadian.ca. We often promote them on our local supporting local website, which is localsupportinglocals.ca. And you can see all of our archives at localsradio.com. Thank you very much.